Good day, dear students. You are welcome to our today's lecture on the theme Equivalence in Translation, the fifth type of equivalence. Lecture number 6. Please write down the plan of our lecture. There are 3 points. First, concept of equivalence. Second, the characteristic features of the fifth type of equivalence. And the third, transmission of the basic meanings of a word in the fifth type of equivalence. An extremely interesting discussion of the notion of equivalence can be found in concept of equivalence. The notion of equivalence at different levels in relation to the translation process, including all different aspects of translation, and hence are put together by the linguistic and the communicative approach. Equivalence can appear at word level and above word level when translating from one language into another. In a bottom-up approach to translation, equivalence at word level is the first element to be taken into consideration by the translator, and in fact, when the translator starts analyzing the source text, he or she looks at the words as single units in order to find a direct equivalent term in the target language. The term word, since it should be remembered that a single word can sometimes be assigned different meanings in different languages and might be regarded as being a more complex unit or morpheme. This means that the translator should pay attention to a number of factors when considering a single word such as number, gender, and tense. Grammatical equivalence appears when referring to the diversity of grammatical categories across languages. It is noted that grammatical rules may vary across languages, and this may pose some problems in terms of finding a direct correspondence in the target language. In fact, different grammatical structures in the source language and target language may cause remarkable changes in the way the information or message is carried across. These changes may include the translator either to add or to omit information in the target text because the lack of particular grammatical devices in the target language itself. Amongst these grammatical devices, which might cause problems in translation, number, tense, and aspects, voice, person, and gender are focused upon. Textual equivalence refers to the equivalence between a source language text and a target language text in terms of information and cohesion. Texture is a very important feature in translation since it provides useful guidelines for the comprehension and analysis of the source text, which can help the translator in his or her attempt to produce a cohesive and coherent text for the target language audience in a specific context. It is up to the translator to decide whether or not to maintain the cohesive ties as well as the coherence in the source language text. His or her decision will be guided by three main factors. That is the target audience, the purpose of the translation, and the text type. Pragmatic equivalence refers to implicatures and strategies of avoidance during the translation process. Implicature is not about what is explicitly said, but what is implied. Therefore, the translator needs to work out implied meanings in translation in order to get the source text message across. The role of the translator is to recreate the author's intention in another culture in such a way that enables the target language reader to understand it clearly. The fifth type of equivalence can be discovered when we analyze the relationships with the respective original. Here we find the maximum semantic similarity between texts in different languages. For example, I saw him at the theater. Мен оны театрда көрдім. The house was sold for $10,000. Үй $10,000 сатылды. The characteristic features of the fifth type of equivalence. First, equivalence of themes which make up the meaning of coordinated words in the original and the translation. Second, parallelism of syntactic structures. Third, similarity of the notional categories which determine the method of describing the situation. Fourth, identification of one and the same situation. And the fifth, the identical functional aim of the utterance, that is, the purpose of communication. Transmission of the basic meanings of a word in the fifth type of equivalence. Denotational meaning, then word, and it divides into connotational meaning and intralinguistic meaning. Different indication of denoted objects, that is, the denotational meaning, the attitude of a speaker towards the denoted object, that is, connotational meaning, semantic connections of the word with other semantic units of the language, that is, intralinguistic meaning. These are transmission of the basic meanings of a word in the fifth type of equivalence. Transmission of the basic meanings of a word. For example, to develop, to spread, to enlarge, to promote. To develop means to bring out the capabilities. To spread means to stretch out in the air. To enlarge means to increase the extent or quality. And to promote means to help or encourage to exist or flourish. Here also you can see transmission of basic meanings of a word in the fifth type of equivalence in comparison of English and Kazakh languages. Here also you can see some examples. Transmission of basic meanings of a word. First, you cannot keep your tongue in your head. Second, I could hear his teeth rattle in his head. third, I've got an eye in my head. The children clapped hands with joy. The equivalence of separate words in the original and the translation supposes also the equivalence of connotational meanings of words. For example, dog, its neutral meaning, doggy, its positive meaning. The way of rendering of intralinguistic meaning in translation differs from the transmission of denotational and connotational meanings. For example, he looked surprisingly young to Greek, who had always thought that the nation's elders were really old. Here the word elders means ülkündür. The notion of equivalence is undoubtedly one of the most problematic and controversial areas in the field of translation theory problems. The term has caused, and it seems quite probable that it will continue to cause, heated debates within the field of translation studies. This term has been analyzed, evaluated, and extensively discussed from different points of view and has been approached from many different perspectives. The first discussions of the notion of equivalence in translation initiated the further elaboration of the term by contemporary theorists. Even the brief outline of the issue given above indicates its importance within the framework of the theoretical reflection on translation. The difficulty in defining equivalence seems to result in the impossibility of having a universal approach to this notion. Now, dear students, you are given control questions. First question is, speak on the concept of equivalence. Second question is, speak on characteristic features of the fifth type of equivalence. And the third question is, describe transmission of the basic meanings of a word in the fifth type of equivalence. Here you can see references which will be useful for you during your preparation for your seminar lessons. Thank you for your attention.